Hi everyone, my name is Sheila and today I'm going to be talking to you about GHB. GHB stands for gamma hydroxybutyrate, with some common street names being G, liquid X, liquid ecstasy, and fantasy. It's available as a powder or liquid that's colorless and odorless with a soapy or salty taste. GHB was first synthesized by the Russian chemist Alexander Zaitsev in 1874, but it wasn't until the 1960s that it was first researched for human use. At the time, it was a popular anesthetic among doctors, but was eventually abandoned due to its poor analgesic effects. In the 1970s, it was recommended to treat narcolepsy, and in the 1980s, it was marketed as a fat burner and muscle developer. In 2000, the US categorized GHB as a Schedule I drug, but is considered Schedule III when sold as Xyram to treat narcolepsy. GHB is most commonly abused by sexual predators as a date rape drug, club-goers for its euphoric effects, and bodybuilders as a growth hormone booster. Despite its reputation as a date rape drug, GHB has gained more popularity recently as a recreational drug. This BuzzFeed article touts it as a responsible high, with people comparing it to alcohol or MDMA without the hangover. The article goes on to tell the story of a guy we'll call Jesse, who accidentally drank something spiked with GHB. As he began to lose consciousness, his friends realized he was overdosing on G, and brought him back to his apartment before heading back out to the club. Sounds like a pretty bad situation, but to his friend's surprise, Jesse reappeared at the club totally sober and awake 3 hours later. They laughed it off and went on to have a fun night of dancing. At low doses, GHB causes euphoria, decreased inhibitions, increased libido, relaxation and sedation, and memory loss. At high doses, it can cause nausea, cardiorespiratory depression, seizure, unconsciousness, and coma, and can be deadly. So, if GHB is a central nervous system depressant, how can it have stimulatory effects like euphoria? It all has to do with its neuropharmacology. Before we get into receptors, it's important to note that GHB is actually a naturally occurring neurotransmitter and a precursor to the neurotransmitter GABA. When you take GHB recreationally, it results in high concentrations in your system, and your body converts it to GABA by the action of GABA transaminase. At endogenous levels, when natural GHB in the body is at low concentrations, the pathway runs the opposite way, and GABA is metabolized into GHB. GHB binds to two important receptors in the central nervous system. It's a full agonist at the GHB receptor and a partial agonist at the GABA-B receptor. As we talked about before, GHB can also be metabolized into GABA, which can then go on to also act at the GABA-B receptor. At low doses, GHB preferentially binds the GHB receptor, which it has a high affinity for. But since the GHB receptor is still not well known, I couldn't find a picture of it or even a description of what it looked like. So we'll just say that this generalized G protein coupled receptor is a GHB receptor. Activation of the GHB receptor results in an increased sodium-potassium current, which may explain the stimulatory effect of GHB at low doses. At high doses, GHB can bind to the GABA-B receptor, which it has a low affinity for, either directly or after it has been metabolized into GABA. Presynaptically, this causes inhibition of voltage-dependent calcium channels, which in turn causes decreased neurotransmitter release. Postsynaptically, it modulates G protein-coupled inward rectifying potassium channels, resulting in more potassium flowing out of the cell and hyperpolarization. Massive absorption of GHB will also desensitize GHB receptors, so that GHB's effect at GABA-B receptors is enhanced. Its action at GABA-B receptors is thought to cause GHB's sedative effects, as well as its properties of addiction, tolerance, and withdrawal. Now Now that we know GHB's neuropharmacology, we can hypothesize what happened to Jesse. When he took a large dose of GHB, it was able to bind to both GHB and GABA B receptors, resulting in sedation and loss of consciousness. Since GHB has a short half-life, in only a few hours it had been metabolized so that the GABA B receptors became unsaturated, and GHB was mostly bound to only GHB receptors, resulting in stimulation so that when Jesse woke up, he was still energized. This mechanism also explains a phenomenon known as the rebound effect, which happens when people who use GHB as a sleeping agent awake suddenly after several hours of GHB-induced deep sleep. GHB has also been shown to have a biphasic effect on dopamine release, according to this microdialysis study done on the rat striatum. The y-axis is a measure of basal dopamine release after GHB administration. The bottom line represents 250 milligrams per kilogram of GHB, and the top line represents 500. The graph shows that at low doses, dopamine release is inhibited, while at high doses, it's increased. Since GABA B receptors have the predominant effect at high doses, this study provides further evidence that GABA B receptors are responsible for the dopamine-stimulating, rewarding, and therefore addictive properties of GHB. GHB has been shown to impair spatial memory in adolescent rats. After 4 days, rats who were administered high doses of GHB did significantly worse in the water maze test than the other rats. This test requires that the rats remember where a hidden platform is in a pool of water. In the same study, researchers used a radioactively labeled NMDA receptor antagonist to show that rats who were administered a high dose of GHB show significantly less binding at NMDA receptors in the frontal cortex. This means that they had fewer NMDA receptors than the other rats. GHB is a particularly dangerous drug because there is a large variability in effects of a particular dose between and within individuals. This means that a euphoric dose for one person could be a sedative dose for another, and it's relatively easy to accidentally overdose. As the popularity of GHB for recreational use continues to rise, so does the number of deaths that it causes. A study of drug-related deaths in London showed that the number of deaths related to GHB more than doubled from 2014 to 2015. GHB is even more dangerous when combined with other depressants and especially alcohol. A 2007 study found that out of 194 deaths attributed or related to GHB over a 10-year period, most were from respiratory depression caused by interaction with alcohol or other drugs. Like any other addictive drug, GHB can cause withdrawal symptoms, notably insomnia, anxiety, tremor, and acute delirium. The mainstay for withdrawal treatment is supportive care and benzodiazepines for delirium. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and thanks for watching. Not like you had a choice.